So Eric, I want to say a big thank you for making time. He's in Tennessee, but he had to wake up very early today and join us. And I don't take his time for granted at all. So Eric, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can delve into the conversation and then take some questions after that.
Hello, my name is Eric, and I work as a data trainer and a prompt engineer for OpenAI. Have been working with the company for the last 2 years as a data trainer and prompt engineering. My role specifically didn't come in from the technical part of it, but as time went by and as much as I got into this whole field, I kind of shifted my approach to the AI as a whole, and currently I do a lot of consultancy in implementing these AI systems, especially ChatGPT, and also I do a lot in terms of I also do study. I'm a student in machine learning and artificial intelligence. But my background as in getting into AI was basically from an editorial perspective. So I was an editor for over 5 years. I was a news editor. So as a news editor, I could write marketing copies and all those things. So when this company came along with this ChatGPT, before you knew what it was, basically they brought in people from the background of language in terms of how you develop, how you write stories and how you create all these things, all these conversations, which at the end gave the model the ability now to communicate like a human being and also to understand these texts from the perspective of a human background. So that's how I all came in, and currently I'm a student of computer science, but also I'm taking my data science again. So that's what I'm doing, and that's why I am a part of the OpenAI team in training the models, be it images, image generating models, be it language models, and the coding models also. That's all I do mostly.
Awesome. So in your space, what, because our conversation with you is basically around ethical development and deployment of AI, what sort of ethical considerations do you guys put in place to make sure that the models that you are training are not biased, or they are not going to affect another person? Because one of the issues that have come out, like Dr. Moore said, they took somebody else's data because the data was open source. They took the data and then they implemented it, and the person reached out to them and told them they should take it out. That's like you taking somebody's intellectual property and implementing it. So with you guys over there, as you're training the models, what do you train the models on, and how do you make sure that what you're doing are ethical?
For us, what we do, mostly we do the data that we use from organizations that we've partnered with. One of them I could point out, there's one called the Quiz, where these people write their questions and all those things. So we use those as part of some of the prompts that we use to train the model on. So it's more of a collaboration between other organizations that equally have this data and us now who have the models. But as time has gone by, since over the last 2 years or 3 years ago, the industry has been growing, as Dr. Moore was pointing out. The data industry is one of the biggest, now the booming thing in town. So many people are coming along as people provide the data, people provide the data for training models. It all depends on what model you want to train on. So if you are training on image generating models, then there are people who have all the data for image generating models. If you want to train on text generating models, there are people who have already the text. They have taken the text through all the processes of cleaning data so that they give you as much diverse and as much accurate data that you can use to train your model on. So it's more of a collaboration, and also now with what has been happening around is now like a whole industry of data is coming up. where people are just selling data to you, and all you have to do is to use it to train your model. Besides, also, there are others who have come up with how do we call them? The tools for training, the tools for training the models. So training the models is something else, and the tools for training the model is another aspect of it. The model is something else, and the tools for training something else. So it kinda has really brought out something bigger than what people had envisioned initially in terms of expanding the market space, and also in terms of all this data that people are providing. And now we are moving into specializations. So if you need data on healthcare and how you need to train your model on healthcare, there is a whole bunch of data providers on healthcare. If you need data on fashion and lifestyle, there's a whole bunch of providers of data on fashion and lifestyle. So it's more of an industry on its own when it comes to data. But for us, that is how we used to go about collaboration with people who have this organization that are generating this data, and also using the public address, publicly available data, be it government, be it one that is retrieved on the internet or something like that, using the scrapping tools and all those you need to retrieve all this data that is publicly available. But once you have all the publicly available data, then you take it to the next step of cleaning it to ensure you remove issues of privacy, or you remove issues of details of people and all those things. Then you can have the data that you can train your model on.
Great. So, one of the biggest concerns about AI is and this has to do with bias, is how the models learn. So, for instance, let me use Twitter, for example. Like if you're using a scraping tool, and the scraping tool is scraping through Twitter, and it's looking at what conversations are going on Twitter to determine how it will respond to people. The way Twitter works is that people literally, somebody will tweet something and another person would come and respond, and then another person will literally come and insult the one that responded, and then so that's how the chain will begin to flow. How do you make sure with you guys that whatever data that you are training the model on is not biased towards one particular thing, and that this data that the model has is fairly balanced and genuine, that the average person can use?
Okay. In terms of ensuring data that is balanced, one of the best things you have to do is to understand that you are training a large language model. So, which essentially means equally the data set should be extremely large. I'm talking in terms of gigabytes of data, not like no sets of data. So it means you have all these gigabytes of data, then you have to go through the cleaning process to get what you need. So in that way, it lessens your chances of being biased. Alternatively, once you train your model, or the next step you do, once you train your model on this data, then you take it through the testing phase where you test it on various aspects. And this is one of the things that we've done, it's like a more of an industry practice, which should be adopted by many. Is look for people who have a specialty in the specific fields and have them to test your model. For instance, let's talk about these issues about racial discrimination, where the models are found. This one, I think, it was on facial recognition. It was on facial recognition softwares that are used to identify people, which were found to be misidentifying people, especially members of the minority here in the US. The blacks and against the whites. These facial recognition softwares were adopted to be used for police in terms of identifying people, identifying criminals and all those stuff. But then along the way, they realized they couldn't rely on them entirely because they were misidentifying people. And when you go down to narrow the problem down, it was identified that the data that we used to use to train these models was more of data containing the whites and less of the blacks. So when it comes to training the model, you find that, when it comes to identifying the faces, it is easy for the model to identify white than to identify black. So in the end, you end up realizing for such a model, for such a learning process of the model to happen, of course, at some point, some states terminated the use of the facial recognition software because it was increasingly becoming unreliable. But the underlying problem was the data set that model was trained on was not as diverse as was the data set for the whites and all those people. So in that case, for instance, a black person is a black person, but within the black community, then we have the black Africans, we have Africans, we have Jamaicans, we have all these people. They are black kids, but when you look at their face, their faces, you realize there's a difference in terms of skin tones and all those other minor details of the skin. In terms of like you could say, a Nigerian looks different from maybe a South African, not because they're not black, they are all black, but in terms of the skin tones and all those. So to avoid such problems, the best approach is to get as much data as possible that is diverse, that is very diverse, and that's very accurate for you to get the best, for you to give your model the best learning experiences. And that's one of the ways you could avoid issues of biasness, issues of discrimination, and all that. Is all based on the data set and the amount of data you're training on, and quality of your data. Is quality of the data, diversity of the data, and the amount of the data.
Great. So what steps do you think organizations and policymakers need to take to address like the potential risks that are associated with AI ethics, especially in the African context? Because for us, we are still growing into that space. So what are the things that we need to know from the ground so that we don't find ourselves wanting when we get there?
I think if I was to say some of the things, this is where I think most people are going wrong. Of course, ChatGPT came up, or it's all over the place. Everyone is all about AI. Everyone wants to invest in this. Everyone wants to get into this. There are so many startups coming up currently across the globe. Let me say that. Even here in the US, there are so many of them coming up. And one of the greatest things that people forget is the fact that these models is not just a one-time thing. It's not something that you can build within a day and tomorrow you have a perfect model. It's something that takes time. It takes really, really a lot of time and a lot of resources, not only in terms of the computational power. Computational power is something else, but in terms of especially the learning process of the model, or the training process of the model. These things are trained and trained and trained and trained. And the best approach, of course, for any startup would be not only to focus more on the training, but focus also on the data that you are training the model on. The more training you give it, the more efficient it becomes. So when you train the model, you could be identifying areas of weaknesses, and then you train your model in those areas of weaknesses for it to be as successful as you could want it to be. There are also, for instance, I can tell you one of the things along the way we came to realize, of course, was the fact that we were building a model. We had very good intentions. People are very happy about this product that we are bringing on board. But then someone else goes to that model and then they think, how can I make a bomb? So you'll be like, oh, hold on a second. Yeah, hold on. We're very good here. And it wasn't our intention for you to make a bomb. So you have to go back again to the model. Now you start introducing those, how do you call the guardrails? The guardrails to prevent people from asking harmful prompts or prompts that provide. Of course, the model can give you the information. So we have to introduce those limitations. No, you shouldn't use this. then again, even with those limitations that you are producing, then someone else again goes and those tweaking the prompt, trying to trick the model, and then of course the model can somehow produce the information, and then you came to like you keep on introducing these guardrails one after the other, one after the other. So for you to produce the perfect model, it's more of training, it's more of testing, and being sensitive. I mean, being open to listen to what other people say about your model. Where are the problems that is generating this data? Where are the issues? And also being clear in terms of how the model does the questions. And that's something else in prompt engineering. So
Right.
when you do all those perfectly, I tend to think you can grow a better model that meets your needs and the needs of your clients.
Awesome. Great stuff. Probably my last but one question I would ask you is that so now we need to get local people in our communities involved in the development. Like Dr. Mo was saying, that the average person can just go can take their phone or whatever it is and and do data gathering to gather data and then just supply data. What should be the approach that a person should take, right, in order for them to ensure that whatever it is that they are doing, it's inclusive and it's not just being biased based on what they like or what they hate?
Okay. Of course, this is one of the big questions we've been dealing with lately. How do you avoid biasness, especially when it comes to opinions and stuff like that?
Right.
But I tend to think that's another thing that can be dealt at a different level. But for now, what you're saying is how do you achieve equity in terms of the data itself that's being collected? To
Yes, sir.
achieve that equity, of course, one of the best approaches is to have people go through the data, people clean up the data, people give you the data that is well. And that's why one thing I tend to think, if your work is to develop the model, just specialize on developing the model. If your work is to provide data to these models, just specialize in providing the data, so that if my work is to build a model that is favoring me or that is gonna give me things that I like, it becomes easier when I outsource this data from someone else who has a specialty in this data in terms of analyzing the data itself, cleaning it up, ensuring that they have minimal biasness. All they do away with the biasness in terms of robustness of the data itself, and in terms of the diversity of the data itself. So when you do that, I think it becomes easier to avoid biasness, especially when you brought it from external source. However, you can still do it at personal level, or at your organizational level. The only thing then could be have an external someone who could go through your data and then they give you an objective opinion on terms of your data set, how good it is or how bad it is. Because one thing you need to realize is these models are as good as the training process. So if you train it on data that is corrupt or data that is inaccurate, then do not cry at the end of it when it gives you the wrong things, or when it gives you biased responses. So as long as you get it right with the data at the beginning in terms of the training process, it becomes easier to get it right at the end. So focus more on getting the data right for efficient and effective models instead of the other way around.
Awesome. Probably my last question I would ask you, and then I'll leave the rest for the audience to ask questions if they have any, is as now that ChatGPT is out there, how can the average person, the average business owner, somebody who is a script writer, somebody who is a news editor, because I remember when I used to work at TV3, I would tell I before this was way back 3 years ago, I told them that they need to start upskilling themselves, because I think a time is coming where AI is going to take their jobs, and they were laughing at me. They thought I wasn't making sense. And then, interestingly, Microsoft laid off their editors for Bing News, for Edge News, and then they started curating news with AI on their platforms. And I told them, you guys, have you seen what's going on? So in order for me, the average person, not to risk losing my job, how can I incorporate ChatGPT into my work to make sure that my work becomes a bit more efficient? Because there's a quote that says that AI will not replace us. It's somebody who uses AI that would replace us. So how do I become the person who would use AI to make sure that nobody replaces me?
Okay. As you pointed out, of course, we've seen people being laid off, especially in these big companies like Meta, or what do you call it? This other one. There's another one. I just forgot the name. Basically, most of the people who are being laid off are those who are being used as what do you call them, the guardrails of the platforms like Meta in terms of content that's generated, those content moderators and all those. But then now tools have come up which can be used for content moderation. Tools have come up which can identify this the wrong content that we need here. We need to remove it. So they kind of eliminating the content moderators and instead replacing them with these tools. The best approach could be, if I am the person, if I am the editor, or if I am the person who's generating this news, of course, the best approach could be be as informed as possible, and also be a use of this platform and these tools, these models. Like I've told you, I was an editor before, but I'm no longer doing the news editing there. What I'm doing now is more of training these models and from the language perspective and all that. So whereas we say we may lose jobs there, we're equally creating another ones here. There are so many people coming up with models, and so many people are trying to come up. There are people. I saw one recently where they were advertising for mathematics. People were into maths to train a model on math, and all those people. There are people who are training chemistry to train a model on chemistry. So when you go, as you go along, you come to realize that we are now moving. Of course, we have this generalized one that is used for everything to answer all sorts of questions and all that. But then people now are moving into specialized models that are used for specific purposes. If I'm with business, I will be using a model for businesses and all that. So whereas we may complain that we've lost jobs in one hand, but then on the other hand, we are creating more jobs. And when you look at it from that perspective, the more you become informed on this model, the more you become, you know how things happen or how to use them, the kind of content that can be generated with them. If I'm a business person, I was using ChatGPT, then I wouldn't need to use someone else to write for me my adverts. I mean, I can just click an advert there, give the details, and then I get my advert, a very perfect one, which is very SEO centric or SEO, SEO safety, and you use it, you post it on your Facebook. I needed someone like, it's very easy now to do things, especially from the marketing perspective and this other content generation perspective. It's easier to do them than you could do them previously. So the more you use these tools, if I was the one using them, because one of the questions as a consultant, some of the questions that I get people asking me about is, how do we use this in doing this? Then I'm like, okay, just go to ChatGPT, do this, and they are like, oh, okay, so you can even do that. I'm like, yeah, you can do whatever you want to do, as long as you are aware that it does these things. So it has so many capabilities that most people do not know. Like generating Twitter posts. Someone could ask you, I need to generate a Twitter post for my advert. I need to generate Facebook posts and all those things. And then you tell them, just go and write whatever you need. The only challenge, of course, is getting it right in terms of how you prompt the model for it to give you the perfect description or the perfect whatever that you need. Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate you making time to be with us now, guys. So I'm opening up for questions. If anybody has a question to ask Eric, please put it in the chat and then let me ask him so that he would answer it right here, right now for all of us. But while we're waiting for the questions, I guys, just so that you don't forget, the reason why we're having this conversation is that there's a future that we're heading towards, and what we're looking to do is to write that future right with the current tool which is available to us in artificial intelligence. And so we want to have a conversation after. I'm still waiting for your questions, but we want to have a conversation about what the future perspectives are going to look like and how that is going to affect, economic growth and job creation. And I'm very pleased to have all these people with this depth of knowledge here and people who are well experienced, like for them to have a conversation about the future perspectives of where AI will take us to and how we can be ready for that. Duke is asking a question and he says, what's your take on Musk's Neuralink concept? Is it a viable concept? Will it confirm the great fear we've been having about AI colonization? Eric, this is to you.
That's a very nice question. But I think the way we are thinking about the Neuralink is kind of totally different from probably what the company is thinking about. I'm not really sure because I'm not part of the Neuralink. But from what I understand is, of course, these microchips have been processed to be put in people's brains and all that. I do not see them being put in brains of people whose minds are straightforward. Probably this is something that's going to help people who have mental challenges, people who are not able to do things because of their mental problems. It's not like they are going to now install microchips on brains of people who have everything together. It's more of helping the society in terms of reducing the number of what I may call in quotes unproductive or rather useless. No, I can't say unproductive people in terms of enhancing their mental capabilities. Right. It's less of it's less of colonizing the human brain by putting it on everybody who can think. It's more of helping those who can think to think. That's what I see. That's how I think about it.
Right. And same thing, Duke. So what it is I've watched a lot of interviews of Elon Musk talking about Neuralink, and he said what they're doing is they want to use it to help people who are incapacitated. It's not necessarily to give it to people who are capable. So if you are capable, you don't need a Neuralink chip in your brain. So like there's somebody whose hand is amputated and the person can't use, or the hand has become like cabbage, the hand can't work. So what Neuralink, because the thing is your hand movement is being communicated by your brain to your arm, tell your arm that lift it up and do this, right? So if your arm can't communicate with your brain, then it can't work. So what Neuralink chips are going to do is it's going to be attached to the part of your brain that controls your arm so that it will help you to send signals to the arm for it to get to work. Or there's somebody whose eyes cannot function properly because they have a defect. Now your brain, the Neuralink chip is going to be able to communicate with your eyes for it to be able to work in the way that it's supposed to work. So that's what Musk has been saying about Neuralink. So it's not like they are going to force everybody to put chips in their mind and you are going to get colonized. You won't be colonized, Duke. So don't worry about that.